Morning light seeped through the tall glass windows of the Malibu cliffside estate, the kind of soft pale glow that suggested the storm had only just quieted, leaving behind a faint scent of wet salt and eucalyptus drifting in from the coastline. Ethan Hale slowly stirred on the living room sofa, the cushion beneath him still holding traces of last night's whiskey-soaked exhaustion, and when he blinked against the brightness filtering through the curtains, he felt the dull throb of a hangover pounding behind his eyes. The room was too quiet, too still, except for a subtle sound he could not immediately place, something soft and rhythmic coming from the kitchen. He rubbed his temples and sat up, trying to make sense of why he had fallen asleep, fully dressed with one shoe still dangling from his heel. And as he forced himself to breathe through the fog, he caught the faint clinking of a spoon tapping lightly against a mug. He frowned, unsure if he was imagining it, but the sound came again, calm and unhurried, and it made the hair on the back of his neck rise. Someone was in his house. His mind raced through every possible explanation, none of them making sense through the haze in his skull. His security system should have been armed. His friends had all left hours before. No one had a key except staff, and even they would never enter unannounced this early. With a startled breath, Ethan pushed himself upright, feeling the cold leather beneath his palm as he steadied himself, and he turned toward the kitchen, expecting to see empty counters and darkened space. Instead, he froze completely. Standing by the stove in a white shirt that was unmistakably his was a young woman with sun-kissed skin and hair still damp from the night's storm, a few loose strands falling against her cheek as she stirred the coffee with slow, deliberate movements. The shirt hung past her thighs, the sleeves rolled up clumsily as if she had pushed them out of her way while working, and the steam from the mug curled upward around her face, like something out of a dream. Ethan's breath caught somewhere in his chest. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The woman turned at the subtle shift of air behind her, her eyes warm but sharp, studying him with an expression he could not read. She tilted her head slightly, almost amused, almost curious, and the softest smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "Good morning, Ethan," she said, her voice low and steady, as if they had known each other far longer than a single night. His name on her tongue startled him more than anything else. He glanced down at the shirt, then back at her, trying to piece together how she had come to wear it, and why she was standing in his kitchen so at ease. His heart hammered, his throat tightened. He tried to speak, but only a hoarse sound escaped. The woman took a slow step toward him, the light catching on her damp eyelashes, and she lowered her voice to something almost conspiratorial. "You do not remember what you told me last night, do you, Mr. Hale?" The words hit him like ice water. Ethan stared at her, hoping she was joking, hoping he had not done something reckless or humiliating, but the look in her eyes told him she was completely serious. He felt the room tilt slightly, the remnants of alcohol and confusion mixing into a knot in his stomach. "What did I say?" he whispered, though he was not sure he wanted the answer. She held his gaze for a long, silent moment, then smiled again, softer this time, with something almost tender beneath the surface. Her fingers brushed the edge of the shirt, as if reminding him whose it was, and she said quietly, "You told me things a man does not say unless he means them." Ethan's chest tightened, and a chill ran down his spine. Whatever had happened last night, whatever he had said, whatever had passed between them, It was clear it was not something he would be able to ignore. The woman stepped back, turning casually to pour herself a cup of coffee, as if she had not just detonated something seismic inside him, and Ethan stood rooted to the floor, unable to breathe, unable to look away, unable to shake the feeling that everything in his life had shifted long before he was ready. And with that, the world around him seemed to fall away, leaving only the echo of her words pulling him backward into the storm-soaked night he could no longer fully remember. For a moment he wondered if he had dreamed her entirely, if the image of her wearing his shirt was nothing more than the cruel trick of an overtired mind, but the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the warmth of her presence made denial impossible. He could hear her soft footsteps moving across the tile floor and grounding him deeper into a reality he was not prepared to face. His pulse quickened as she lifted the cup to her lips, her expression unreadable, and he felt the sharp sting of vulnerability cut through the remnants of alcohol clouding his thoughts. He tried to gather his composure, straighten his posture, remind himself that he was a man who negotiated billion-dollar deals without flinching, yet in this moment confronted only by a woman in his shirt and the weight of a memory he could not grasp, he felt completely undone. She glanced at him again, her eyes lingering just a second too long, and something in her gaze suggested that whatever he had said the night before had mattered to her in a way he could not yet understand. He swallowed hard, his mind spinning with questions he was not sure how to ask, and fears he was not ready to voice, and the storm outside, now fading into gentle drizzle, seemed almost symbolic, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for the truth to surface. The night before the storm softened into morning light had been a different world, one soaked in the sharp burn of whiskey and the restless ache of a man trying to outrun the pieces of his own life. Ethan Hale had arrived at his Malibu estate with 3 business partners who insisted he needed a break before the biggest acquisition of his career, a deal that would shift the entire medical tech landscape. The ocean roared violently against the cliff's wind, slashing through the palms outside, as if echoing the chaos inside him. Ethan had tried to stay composed, polite, even, but grief simmered beneath everything he touched. 2 months earlier, he had walked into what was supposed to be his engagement dinner, only to discover the woman he planned to marry in another man's arms. Not just any man, but a rival executive who had always envied Ethan's success. The media found out within hours. Headlines exploded. Billionaire betrayed. Hale left at the altar of a corporate marriage. Ethan had said nothing publicly, but the silence had not protected him from the humiliation. Reporters camped outside his offices. Investors questioned his state of mind. And the worst part was not the betrayal, but how small it had made him feel behind closed doors. His partners thought dragging him to Malibu to drink away the tension would help, but as the storm clouds gathered and the wind rattled the balcony doors, Ethan felt his chest tighten until he could barely breathe. He poured another drink, then another, chasing numbness like oxygen. The rain hit the glass with brutal force, and thunder cracked across the sky. His friends laughed about old deals toasted to new ones, joked about Ethan finally being a free man, but he barely heard them. Every sound felt muffled under the weight of memories he no longer wished to carry. Hours blended together, whiskey warming his veins, while the storm outside grew louder, and at some point his partners called a car. and left shouting something about seeing him in the morning to finalize documents. The moment their voices disappeared, Ethan felt the silence hit him like a punch. He removed his tie, swaying slightly, and stared at the swirling ocean through the rain-streaked windows. Then the power flickered. A second flicker. Then darkness swallowed the house, except for the faint emergency lights humming along the floor. Ethan exhaled sharply, trying to steady himself, but his legs were uncooperative, the alcohol dragging him down into a fog. That was when the doorbell rang. He stiffened, not expecting anyone, and not entirely certain he had heard correctly. But the chime came again, longer this time, followed by a tentative knock. Ethan stumbled toward the entryway, gripping the wall to keep himself upright. He opened the door and blinked through the rain. Standing there drenched from head to toe was a young woman clutching a small folder to her chest, her hair plastered against her face as she shivered in the cold downpour. Her voice trembled slightly when she spoke. "Hi, I am sorry to bother you, sir. I know it is late. I came for the housekeeping interview." Ethan stared at her, unable to process how someone could look so calm in a storm like this. The security team must have forgotten to cancel her appointment. Thunder cracked behind her, making her flinch, and something in Ethan's chest tugged unexpectedly. He stepped aside, gesturing for her to come in, and she entered cautiously, water dripping onto the marble floor. She wore simple clothes, dark jeans, and a thin blouse that was soaked through, clinging to her arms. She gave him a polite, unsure smile. "My name is Lena Morales. I was told to come today, but the storm got worse on the way here. I am really sorry if I arrived at the wrong time." Ethan tried to respond, but the alcohol muffled his thoughts. He nodded, motioning toward the living room where faint emergency lights still glowed. She followed him in, looking around the space with quiet awe, but also a kind of gentle respect that felt different from the people who usually stood in this house. Ethan collapsed onto the sofa, exhausted lines of strain still etched across his features. Lena stood a respectful distance away, clutching the folder tighter. "If this is not a good time, I can leave and come back tomorrow morning." Her voice was soft but steady. Lightning flashed, illuminating her face for a brief moment, and Ethan found himself struck by the sincerity in her expression. "No, stay, please," he murmured, then winced at how desperate he must have sounded. She hesitated only a moment before nodding. The lights flickered again, then returned, and Lena glanced toward the corner where the circuit panel was located. "It looks like the pump outside is overflowing," she said quietly. "That could be why the power keeps cutting. Do you want me to check it?" Ethan blinked at her, confused. "You know how to do that." She gave a small smile. "I grew up fixing things because no one else could. It is just water pressure." Without waiting for his reply, she slipped off her wet shoes and hurried out the back door, disappearing into the storm again. Ethan swayed slightly, watching her through the rain-streaked window. She moved with purpose and confidence, adjusting the pump and clearing debris despite the harsh wind whipping around her. Something in him loosened, feeling strangely grounded by her presence. When she returned, soaked even more than before, she gave him a nod. "It should work now, sir." She shivered lightly, and Ethan noticed her lips turning pale from the cold. He tried to stand, but misjudged his balance and stumbled forward. Lena moved instinctively, catching his arm before he fell, and her hands were warm despite being drenched. Ethan felt his breath hitch at the unexpected closeness. The storm roared outside, but inside there was only the quiet rhythm of her breathing and the faint hum of emergency lights. In a voice barely above a whisper, Ethan said words he would not remember the next morning. "I wish someone like you walked into my life earlier." Lena froze, her eyes widening slightly. "Sir, you are drunk." Ethan shook his head, though he could hardly keep it steady. "No, I can feel it. I feel you. You are real. You are not like them. Please do not leave." His hand brushed hers unintentionally, his palm warm against her cold fingers. She steadied him gently, guiding him toward the sofa and covering him with a blanket. For a moment she lingered, her gaze softening at the vulnerability she saw beneath the layers of wealth and armor. Then she whispered quietly, almost to herself, "You are not who they say you are." As thunder rolled across the sky, Ethan's eyes fluttered shut, and the last thing he felt was her presence beside him, like the first moment of calm he had had in months. The storm had already taken most of the night before surrendering to a heavy silence. But inside the Malibu estate, the tension between exhaustion and emotion still hung thick in the air. Ethan Hale lay half awake, on the sofa, drifting between brief flashes of memory and stretches of blankness, his mind fogged from alcohol and the overwhelming sense that something in his world had cracked open. He heard faint footsteps moving across the hallway, a soft, cautious rhythm that did not feel intrusive but careful, like someone who did not want to disturb the air around her. Lena Morales moved quietly, tidying the scattered glasses from the night before, gently adjusting the blanket over Ethan's shoulders when he stirred and checking the emergency lights that were still flickering from the storm. She had no obligation to stay, yet she had remained because something about the house, about the man on the sofa, felt too unsteady to leave behind in such darkness. Ethan shifted again, trying to sit up, though his vision blurred at the edges and his balance faltered. He pressed a hand against the armrest, attempting to steady himself, but when he stood, the room tilted sharply, and his foot slipped on the damp patch near the entryway where Lena's rain-soaked shoes had been. He lost his footing and pitched forward toward the marble stairs leading down to the lower lounge. For a split second, everything felt suspended and weightless, but before he could crash against the steps, Lena reacted with lightning speed. She dropped the cloth she was holding and lunged forward, catching his arm with both hands and bracing her entire body to stop his fall. The force of his weight pushed her back slightly, yet she held on firmly, her fingers tightening around his forearm as she guided him away from the edge and down onto the sofa. Ethan blinked up at her, his breath unsteady, the shock sobering him more than any cold water could. Her face hovered inches from his, her expression a mixture of fear and determination. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her voice trembling, though she kept it steady. Ethan stared at her, unsure how to respond. The warmth of her hands, the scent of rain, still clinging to her hair, the quiet strength in her gaze, all felt too real, too grounding. "I am fine," he managed, though his voice cracked. "You could have cracked your skull," she murmured, more to herself than to him. When he tried to sit up again, she pressed a gentle hand to his shoulder. "Just stay still for 1 minute, please." Her tone was firm but not harsh, and Ethan found himself obeying without resistance. For the first time in months, someone was speaking to him without expectation, without calculation, without treating him like a headline or a bank account or a stepping stone. She crouched beside him, checking his pupils, the way someone who had seen enough accidents in life learned to do out of necessity. Her touch was careful, warm, steady. Ethan watched her in a daze, feeling a strange ache rise in his chest. Not the ache of pain, but of recognition, as if he had seen her before, in some distant part of his life, even though he knew he had not. When she finally seemed convinced he was not seriously hurt, she exhaled with relief and sat on the edge of the coffee table facing him. "You should not be walking alone," she said quietly. "You are not steady." Ethan swallowed, feeling embarrassed, though the embarrassment was softened by the sincerity in her voice. "I did not mean to cause trouble," he whispered. Lena shook her head lightly. "Trouble is falling down marble stairs in a blackout. Helping you is not trouble." His gaze drifted down to where her hand still rested lightly near his wrist, as if she was not quite ready to let go in case he slipped again. In the dim glow of the emergency lights, her eyes looked deeper, more vulnerable, more real than anything he had seen in months. Something inside him cracked open, the same fragile place that had spoken the night before, when he had whispered words he barely remembered. "I did not imagine you right," he said softly. "You really came here last night." Lena hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, for the job. The appointment was scheduled weeks ago. I did not expect the storm. I did not expect you to open the door, drunk and half-frozen, and definitely not expecting me." Ethan closed his eyes, remembering fragments of rain and her voice, and the warmth of her hand on his arm. "I said things, did I not?" Lena inhaled slowly, as if weighing how much truth to give him while he was still vulnerable. "You were not making sense, but you were honest. Maybe too honest." Ethan looked at her again, a line of fear forming between his brows. "Did I make you uncomfortable?" She shook her head quickly, her expression softening. "No, you were not inappropriate. You were just hurt and a little lost, and maybe you needed someone to hear you for a minute." Her voice grew gentler, the kind that could steady a storm just by existing. "I did not leave because I thought you might get sick, or fall, or do something reckless. You looked like someone who had not had a person stay for the right reasons in a long time." Ethan's breath caught the words, hitting deeper than she probably intended. He sat slowly pulling the blanket around his shoulders as the house hummed back to life with a low rumble of returning electricity. Lena rose to check the lights, but when she stepped away, Ethan instinctively reached for her wrist, stopping her for a second. His voice was quiet, almost raw. "Thank you for catching me." She turned back, her expression unreadable, but her eyes warm. Someone had to. He nodded, unable to find words. She gently freed her wrist, but lingered one heartbeat longer than necessary before stepping toward the hallway. Ethan watched her silhouette move through the dim light, and something inside him shifted, a quiet, undeniable truth beginning to take form. For the first time in a very long time, he did not feel alone. Morning crept into the house with a softness that did not match the chaos of the night before, and Ethan Hale woke slowly, as if surfacing from deep water. His head throbbed with a slow, steady ache, and his mouth felt dry, the lingering taste of whiskey reminding him exactly how much he had tried to forget. The blanket draped over him carried a faint scent he could not place at first, something warm and clean and unfamiliar but comforting in a way he could not explain. As he shifted upright, the events of the previous night flickered in disjointed pieces. The storm, the power outage, the fall that almost sent him tumbling down the stairs, and her, the woman with rain-soaked hair and steady hands, Lena Morales. He remembered fragments of her voice, her worry the feel of her hand, catching him just before marble met bone. But everything else was fog-powdered around the edges of memory. The estate was quiet, too quiet, for a home that should have been empty, except for him and maybe a security guard outside. Yet he heard movement again, gentle measured, almost domestic. A soft hum, the faint clink of silverware, the shuffle of bare feet across tile. Ethan rubbed his face, willing the fog to clear, and pushed himself off the sofa. His socks slid slightly on the polished floor, and he gripped the back of a chair, steadying himself. When he finally looked up, the breath left his chest in one abrupt rush. Standing by the kitchen counter brewing coffee was Lena. But not the Lena from last night, drenched and shivering. This Lena was different in a way that made his pulse spike sharply. She wore a crisp white dress shirt that unmistakably belonged to him, the fabric loose and oversized falling just above her knees. Her damp hair had dried into soft waves, brushing over her shoulders, and her legs were bare except for a small bandage on her ankle from her work outside in the storm. She stood in the soft morning light, backlit slightly so the edges of her silhouette glowed, and Ethan felt something inside him jolt awake, as if the world had shifted without asking him first. She turned when she sensed him behind her, and the quiet confidence in her eyes caught him even more off guard than the sight of her in his clothes. "Good morning," she said, her voice calm-warm, almost teasing. Ethan stared, unable to form a coherent reply. His mouth opened, then closed again, as he struggled to piece together a sentence. "You are wearing my shirt," he finally muttered, though it sounded more like an accusation than anything else. Her lips curved slightly. "My clothes were soaked from the storm. I found this on the chair near the stairs. I hope you do not mind." He did mind, or maybe he did not. He was not sure what he felt because every rational thought was drowned out by the way she looked standing there so effortlessly comfortable in a house she had barely entered 12 hours earlier. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, wincing as his headache pulsed. "Did we talk last night?" He asked, hesitating, the way a man hesitates when he fears the answer might break him. Lena's eyes softened just a little, and she set the spoon down gently, as if preparing him. "You do not remember what you told me?" she asked. Ethan's stomach tightened, the dread rising slowly, like tidewater. "I remember pieces," he admitted. "Not everything." Her gaze held his for a long, steady moment. There was no judgment in it, only a quiet patience that made him feel even more exposed. He took a careful breath. "What did I say?" Lena stepped closer, her movements deliberate, unhurried, the faint scrape of her bare feet on tile grounding him in a way he did not expect. She stopped a few feet away, close enough for him to see the small flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "Ethan, you told me things a man usually keeps locked inside," she said quietly. "Things that do not come out in polite conversation." His pulse thudded unevenly, and the room seemed to shrink around them. What things he asked, though part of him already knew, the answer would not be simple. She looked down for a moment, brushing her fingers lightly along the hem of his shirt, then lifted her gaze again, meeting his with steady calm. "You said you wished you had met me before everything in your life fell apart." Ethan froze. His breath caught mid-inhale. The house, the light, the breeze from the cracked window. Everything seemed to fade until all he could feel was the echo of those words sinking deep. He shook his head, jaw tightening. "I was drunk." Lena tilted her head slightly. "Maybe, but drunk words often come from sober wounds." The truth of her statement landed like a weight on his chest, and Ethan felt the instinctive urge to retreat, hide behind anger or sarcasm, or the cold stoicism he used to keep the world out. But Lena did not move. She simply stood there watching him, with honesty so clear it felt like a mirror held up to everything he tried to bury. Ethan turned away, gripping the counter as he tried to steady himself. "This is crazy," he whispered. "You do not even know me." "You are right," she replied softly. "I do not. But last night, when you could barely stand, you were not trying to impress anyone. You were just a man hurting and trying to hold himself together." Ethan winced, feeling the sting of truth, sharper than embarrassment. "I did not mean to pull you into that," he murmured. "I do not want to be someone who drags people down with him." Lena walked to the sink, rinsing her cup, her voice gentle but sure. "You did not drag me anywhere. I chose to stay because someone needed to." That was all. He turned back to her eyes, searching hers for something he did not yet understand. "Why, though?" he asked. "Why would you stay for a stranger?" Lena paused, drying her hands on a towel. For the first time, something flickered across her face, something vulnerable, almost shy. "Because you looked lonely," she said softly. "In a way, I recognized." The words unraveled something deep inside him, a knot he had not realized he was holding. Ethan exhaled slow, carefully controlled. This time when he spoke, his voice was quiet, stripped of all shields. "I should thank you for last night, for not letting me fall, for not leaving." Lena gave a small, almost invisible smile. "You do not need to thank me. I just did what anyone with a conscience would do." "Not anyone," Ethan replied under his breath. "Not anymore." She blinked at him gently, surprised but did not look away. And for the first time, Ethan realized that whatever had started last night was not something he could easily dismiss or bury. Not when the truth lingered between them more clearly than the quiet morning light. Not when she stood in his shirt like the living reminder of a moment he could not take back. Not when he still felt the echo of her hands catching him before he fell. Something had begun. Something neither of them fully understood yet, but neither of them could deny. The silence that followed lingered thick and fragile, the kind of silence that made every breath louder, every heartbeat sharper. Ethan Hale stood in the middle of his own kitchen, feeling exposed in a way he had not felt since the day the engagement scandal broke. But this moment with Lena felt different. More dangerous, more intimate. Because here his reputation meant nothing, his wealth meant nothing. There was no boardroom, no shareholders, no cameras waiting to catch him falling apart. There was only a woman wearing his shirt, and the truth he no longer knew how to hide behind. Ethan dragged a hand through his hair, trying to collect himself, but the motion only deepened the slight tremble in his fingers. Lena watched him quietly, arms crossed loosely over her stomach, as if she was bracing for whatever came next. She was not defensive, not intimidated, simply waiting with a patience that made him feel even more seen than before. Finally, he forced words out. "I was drunk," he repeated, voice rough, desperate, to put distance between himself and the vulnerability she had witnessed. People say things when they have had too much. They do not mean anything. Lena's brows lifted just slightly. "Do you believe that?" Ethan hesitated longer than he intended. "I believe it is safer that way," he answered. She studied him for a beat, then said softly, "Safer does not mean truer." The air shifted. Ethan felt the familiar instinct to shut down rise in him, the same instinct that had protected him all these years from heartbreak, betrayal, and disappointment. He straightened his posture, letting coldness settle across his face like armor. "Look, let us be clear," he said, forcing command into his tone. "You were here for a job interview. I do not want you to think I crossed any line with you. I do not want misunderstandings. You did not do anything wrong," Lena responded, calm but unwavering. "You were hurting, but you were respectful. Nothing you said was inappropriate." He pressed harder, needing distance. "Whatever I said last night was not real. I do not remember it, and I do not want it to complicate anything." Lena inhaled slowly, her expression tightening just a little, though she kept her voice even. "Understood. You want to pretend it was nothing." "Yes," he snapped, "because it was nothing." The moment the words left his mouth, he regretted them. He saw the flicker in her eyes, the small flinch she tried to hide, the way her chin lifted in that silent, steady resilience people learn when life has forced them to endure more than they should have. She nodded once. "Then I should go," she said quietly. "I did not come here to make your life harder. I came to work. But it seems like my being here is making things uncomfortable, so I will leave before it becomes a problem." She stepped past him, heading toward the front door. Ethan's chest seized unexpectedly, panic rising fast and sharp. He should have let her walk away. It was the logical thing to do. Clean boundaries, simple exits. But the moment she moved toward the door, something inside him snapped. His voice came out before his mind caught up. "Wait." Lena stopped but did not turn around. Her shoulders were stiff, the tension in her body unmistakable. Ethan swallowed, trying to find words through the tightness in his throat. "Please do not leave, not yet." Slowly she turned, meeting his gaze. "Why?" He opened his mouth, but nothing coherent came out. "Because last night you saw me at my worst," he muttered. "And you did not judge me." She blinked as if thrown by his honesty. Ethan stepped closer, the edges of his armor cracking piece by piece. "And I do not want the first real person who has stepped into this house in months to walk out thinking I am ungrateful or cruel." Lena's expression softened, though wariness still lingered. "I do not think you are cruel, Ethan. I think you are scared." The words cut deeper than anything she had said so far. He exhaled unsteady. "I do not get scared. Everyone gets scared," she replied gently. "Even billionaires, especially billionaires who have been hurt." He flinched because she was right, because the truth of it landed in the hollow space behind his ribs where loneliness had built a home. Ethan sat heavily on the edge of the counter, rubbing his forehead. "Last night was bad," he admitted quietly. "The worst I have been in a long time." The silence that followed was not cold this time. It was patient, compassionate. Lena walked toward him slowly, as if giving him time to breathe. She rested her hands lightly on the back of a chair, grounding herself. "I did not stay because of the job," she said. "I stayed because you looked like someone who needed a moment of kindness." The sentence hit him with surprising force. He lifted his eyes to her, theirs locking in a gaze that felt too intimate, too exposed, too honest. Lena took a small breath. "But if me staying right now makes you feel ashamed, then I will go." "No," he said quickly. Too quickly. Her eyebrows raised. "So you want me to stay?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, just long enough for me to stop making a fool of myself." Lena exhaled a small, almost reluctant laugh. A delicate crack formed in the tension between them. She stepped back into the kitchen, giving him space, but not leaving. Ethan watched her as she moved quietly, opening the small pantry, reorganizing something just to keep her hands busy. The more he watched her, the more something inside him twisted. She was calm where he was chaos, steady where he was broken, and he hated how much he needed that steadiness from a woman he had barely known for 12 hours. "Lena," he said suddenly. She turned. "What did I really say last night?" "The truth," Ethan tensed. "Which was?" "That you wished someone real had walked into your life sooner. That you were tired of being surrounded by people who only stay for the wrong reasons." His breath caught. "And that you did not want to be alone anymore." The room felt too small, too warm, too honest. Ethan leaned against the counter, feeling the truth of her words shake something loose deep inside him. This woman, this near stranger standing in his shirt, holding truths he had tried so hard to bury, had somehow managed to break through his armor without even meaning to. For the first time in years, Ethan Hale had no idea what to do with his own heart. The afternoon passed with a strange quietness settling over the Malibu estate. The kind of quiet that comes after emotional tension has stretched itself thin and finally loosened, leaving behind a hollow space neither person fully understood yet. Ethan tried to distract himself by reviewing documents for the upcoming acquisition, but every few minutes his thoughts drifted back to Lena, to the honesty in her eyes when she said he looked lonely, to the truth she had spoken even when he tried to deny everything. She moved quietly through the house, wiping counters, folding blankets, restoring order to a space that had been weighed down by solitude for too long. He watched her from a distance at times, not in a possessive way, but in a way a man watches something he does not want to lose without knowing why. She was careful with boundaries, never lingering too long in the same room, never assuming comfort she had not earned, and somehow that only made him more aware of her presence. As the day dipped into early evening, the air outside shifted. The sky darkened with a heavy gray that rolled in from the ocean, and the wind picked up again, hitting the windows with a familiar pressure. "Another storm," Ethan muttered under his breath as he glanced toward the coastline. He hoped it would be mild, a leftover stretch of weather from the night before, but the clouds gathering told a different story. Lena stood near the hallway, folding one of the blankets she had washed earlier, and glanced toward the widening darkness outside. "It looks worse than yesterday," she said softly. The forecast did not mention another storm. Ethan checked his phone, frowning as alerts from the city popped up one after another. Flash flood warnings, road closures, emergency advisories. His jaw tightened. He remembered too clearly how she had arrived last night, soaked and shivering, how she had gone out in the middle of that weather to fix the pump without hesitation. He did not want her anywhere near that danger again. "The storm will hit harder this time," he said. "Maybe you should stay here until it clears." Lena paused and gave a polite but strained smile. "I appreciate that, but I already stayed longer than I was supposed to. I should head home before it gets worse." Ethan felt something inside him tense, with an instinctive fear he could not explain. He tried to keep his voice even. The roads might close again. You could get stuck in the flooding. "I will be fine," she insisted, though her gaze flicked nervously toward the windows. "I know these streets well. It is only a 40-minute bus ride." That only made him more uneasy. "Buses do not run during flash floods," he said. "I can have my driver take you." But Lena shook her head quickly. "No, Ethan, that is too much. I do not want to involve you more than I already have. You have been kind enough." Ethan stepped forward, tension rising. "This is not about kindness, it is about safety." She held his gaze for a long second, and he could see in her eyes that she was tired, overwhelmed, unsure how to navigate the blurry line forming between them. "That is exactly why I should leave," she whispered. "Before any of this becomes something it is not supposed to be." The air thickened with something sharp and unspoken, and before Ethan could answer, thunder cracked loudly, shaking the glass panels and making the power flicker again. Lena startled, glancing around the dimming room. "I really should go," she said, grabbing her small bag from the counter. "I do not want to trouble you any more." Ethan opened his mouth to stop her, but she was already moving toward the door, her steps quick and uneven. Fear shot through him. So suddenly he felt breathless, as if a string inside him had been pulled too tight and now threatened to snap completely. "Lena, wait," he called out, but she hesitated only a second before pushing the door open. A violent gust of cold wind and rain slammed into the entryway, drenching the floor immediately. Lightning illuminated the driveway in sharp white flashes. Lena pulled her thin sweater tighter around herself and stepped out hurriedly as Ethan watched helplessly. She disappeared into the rain before he could react. For a moment he stood frozen, wrestling with the hesitation that had ruled so much of his life these past months. But then another bolt of lightning split the sky, and he snapped into motion. He grabbed his phone, tossed on shoes, and raced outside, ignoring the sting of rain against his face. The storm had grown fierce fast, the kind that howled violently as if trying to push every living thing off the cliffs and into the dark ocean below. Ethan tried to call her number, but the message showed no service, and worry carved a deep line into his brow. He jogged toward the guard station, soaked within seconds. "Have you seen the maid who just left?" Ethan shouted over the storm. The guard nodded, eyes wide with concern. "She headed toward the bus stop, sir, but the roads are starting to flood. Cameras near the hill are already cutting out." That was all Ethan needed to hear. He did not think. He simply moved, running to his car and starting the engine with trembling hands. The wipers smeared rain rather than clearing it, the visibility almost non-existent as water pounded against the windshield. He scanned the road, illuminated only by occasional bursts of lightning and patches of flickering streetlights. The road leading down the hill was already glossy with standing water and debris from fallen branches. He drove slowly but urgently, heart-pounding, as he kept searching for her silhouette. Minutes passed with no sign of her, and panic began clawing at his chest. He kept imagining her alone, cold, terrified, maybe slipping on the wet pavement, or worse, swept by rising water. He clenched the steering wheel harder than necessary, forcing his breath to stay even. Then, through the sheets of rain, he saw movement near the corner of a closed convenience store. A small covered awning shielded a narrow strip of dry pavement, just enough space for someone to stand, and beneath it he saw her. Lena stood with her arms wrapped around herself, shivering so violently her teeth clattered. Her thin sweater was soaked completely, offering no protection from the cold. She was leaning slightly against the wall, trying to stay upright, her hair plastered to her cheeks, her face pale. Ethan pulled over and jumped out of the car, ignoring the water rushing around his ankles. "Lena," he shouted over the roar of the storm. She looked up, startled, her eyes wide with a mixture of relief and confusion. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" she called back. "You should not be out in this. You should not be out in this either." He answered, moving toward her quickly. You are freezing. She shook her head, stubborn even in her trembling state. I was waiting for the bus. I thought maybe it would still come. It will not, he said firmly. Not in this weather. She tried to argue, but another gust of cold wind hit her, making her sway on her feet. Instinctively, Ethan shrugged off his thick vest and draped it over her shoulders, pulling it securely around her to keep her warm. It was not intimate, not possessive, just protective, the way one would help someone fragile in a storm. She inhaled sharply as the warm fabric wrapped around her, and Ethan stepped in front of her, blocking the wind with his body. Rain hammered against him, soaking through his shirt, but he held his ground, shielding her without touching her unnecessarily. He looked into her eyes through the dim flicker of the street lamp above them. I should have made sure you were safe before letting you walk out, he said, voice steady, despite the storm. She lowered her gaze, tears mixing with raindrops. I did not want to cause more trouble for you. You are not trouble, Lena. You never were. Another crack of thunder rolled across the sky, and she flinched, leaning slightly against the wall for support. Ethan noticed her lips turning faintly blue, and worry tightened his chest. You are shaking, he said softly. Let me take you back. You need warmth and dry clothes. She hesitated, her pride pushing one way, her fear the other. But when another blast of wind made her knees buckle slightly, she finally nodded. Please. Ethan placed a guiding hand near her elbow, not gripping her, just steadying her, as they walked quickly back to the car. He opened the passenger door and helped her inside, gently closing it before running around to the driver's side. Once inside, she curled into the vest, pulling it tight around her shoulders, and Ethan turned the heater on full blast. The difference in temperature hit her immediately, and he saw her eyes flutter with relief as warmth spread across her skin. During the short drive, she remained quiet, her gaze focused on the raindrops streaming down the window. Ethan kept glancing at her heart, tightening every time he saw her shiver. When they arrived, he helped her inside the estate, guiding her toward the living room fireplace. She sank onto the sofa, breathing shakily as he grabbed blankets and wrapped them around her carefully. Do you feel dizzy? He asked, kneeling beside her. A little, she admitted. And cold. Ethan moved quickly, heating water for tea, grabbing a warm towel, adjusting the thermostat. He had not moved with such instinctive care for anyone in years, and the realization settled heavily in the space between them. When he returned, Lena was trembling less, but her cheeks were flushed with the beginnings of fever. Ethan placed the warm towel gently around her neck, and she leaned into its heat, eyes closing briefly. You really did not have to come after me, she whispered. Yes, I did, he replied softly, because you did not leave me alone last night. I could not let you face this storm alone either. Her breath caught slightly, but she said nothing, and the silence that stretched between them was full of something tender, something new, something neither of them had the courage to name yet. Rain battered the windows again, but inside the room felt warm, like the beginning of something fragile and necessary. Lena opened her eyes, meeting his with quiet vulnerability. I did not stay last night because of the job, she whispered, her voice faint from exhaustion. I stayed because you looked lonely. Her confession struck him deeper than anything she had said so far. He sat down slowly on the edge of the coffee table, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, watching her with an intensity that felt both fragile and fierce. Then stay tonight because it is dangerous, he said. Not because of me, not because of anything else. just because I need to know you are safe." Lena studied him, her expression softening, her guard lowering as the storm raged outside. Finally, she nodded. "Just tonight." Relief washed through him, a slow, steady warmth spreading through his chest. He rose and adjusted the blankets around her once more, careful not to cross any lines. She watched him with heavy eyes, exhaustion pulling her deeper into the cushions. Ethan sat on the nearby armchair, close enough to keep watch, but far enough to give her space. He intended to stay awake until she was warm and stable again, but somewhere between, listening to her soft breathing and the distant rumble of thunder, he fell asleep too. Outside, the storm continued to roar, but inside something much quieter and far more powerful had settled. The beginning of trust. The beginning of a bond neither of them had expected. The night he almost lost her became the night he realized he could not. The storm passed sometime before dawn, leaving the Malibu coast washed clean and strangely quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like a held breath, as if the world is waiting to see what comes next. And inside the living room, Ethan woke with a stiff neck and the unfamiliar weight of having slept in the armchair all night. At first he was disoriented, listening to the faint rumble of the ocean, not yet remembering why he was there, instead of in his bedroom. But then he turned his head and saw Lena sleeping on the chaise longue, wrapped in blankets, her breathing soft and steady, and everything from the night before rushed back in vivid clarity. She looked small beneath the layers of fabric, her dark lashes resting against her cheeks, her hair slightly damp from the fever that had risen and then broken sometime during the early hours. She was safe, warm, resting, and his chest loosened with a relief so deep he felt it in his bones. He stood slowly, not wanting to wake her, and moved to the kitchen to make something hot. He had never cooked for anyone, not even his ex-fiancée, who had preferred meals catered and plated to perfection. But now he found himself cracking eggs, heating a pan, boiling water for tea, fumbling a little, but trying because it mattered, and because Lena mattered in a way he still struggled to understand fully. As he moved quietly around the kitchen, he kept glancing toward the living room to make sure she was still resting comfortably. When he finally brought the tray over, setting it on the marble coffee table, she stirred gently, eyes fluttering open with confusion before soft recognition settled in. Her voice was hoarse when she whispered, "Did you stay there all night?" Ethan nodded, running a hand through his hair that looked even more tousled than usual. "I wanted to make sure your fever did not spike again," he said. "How do you feel?" She sat up slowly, hugging the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Better. Still tired, but better. The warmth of the room, the blankets, the tea he brought, everything softened her expression. And for a moment, she simply looked at him with something like gratitude, something that made Ethan feel strangely unsteady. He gestured to the breakfast he had prepared. "I tried," he said, almost apologetically. "It may not be great." Lena blinked, then a small, unguarded smile appeared, one that hit him harder than he expected. "Ethan, this looks perfect." She took a careful sip of the tea and inhaled deeply, letting the warmth settle in her. Ethan sat across from her elbows, resting on his knees, studying her with a seriousness that made her shift slightly. "You scared me last night," he finally said, voice low-controlled, but carrying an emotional weight she could not ignore. Lena lowered her gaze. "I should not have left the way I did. I just did not want to be a burden." His jaw tensed. "You are not a burden. You never were." She swallowed hard, her fingers curling around the cup. "You do not have to say that. I know my place here, Ethan. I work for you, and I have already caused too much trouble." Ethan leaned forward, eyes locked on hers with an intensity that made her breath hitch. "You think you caused trouble by being honest with me. You think you caused trouble by telling me the truth when no one else in my life does." Last night he paused, searching for words. "Last night I realized something." Lena waited, unsure if she even wanted to hear what came next. Ethan continued, "When you walked into this house, you were not just someone doing a job. You changed something in here." He gestured vaguely around the empty room. "It has been cold and quiet for months, and you brought life back into it, back into me." The confession hung in the air, warm and dangerous. Lena shook her head, slightly overwhelmed. "Ethan, I cannot stay because you feel obligated after last night, or because you feel guilty about what you said when you were drunk." He exhaled through his nose, his voice steady but firm. "That is not why I am asking you to stay." She looked at him, searching his face for any sign of pity or impulsive attachment, and found none, only sincerity tinted with exhaustion and something deeper. He stood abruptly and walked to the window, pushing open the large curtains, letting sunlight flood the room. The coastline glowed under the morning light, the ocean calm as if the storm had never touched it. Ethan turned back to her, the golden light outlining him. "I am asking you to stay because I want you here," he said simply, "not out of guilt, not out of obligation, because last night made me see how much I do not want to face things alone anymore." Lena breathed in sharply, her chest tightening with emotion she did not know how to handle. Ethan moved closer, but kept a respectful distance. "I want to hire you full-time," he said. "Better pay, better schedule, anything you need." The offer hung between them, heavy with implication. She hesitated. "Ethan, I cannot accept a job because you are feeling emotional after a storm." He let out a soft, frustrated laugh. "This is not about the storm, and you know it. You think I am impulsive, but trust me, I do not make decisions without thinking them through. You being here feels right." Lena felt a sting behind her eyes because she had never been wanted anywhere, never been chosen, not like this, not so simply, and without conditions. She looked down at her hands, speaking quietly. "I cannot stay if it is out of pity or guilt. I cannot live my life being someone to fix." Ethan crouched slightly, so he was level with her, his gaze unwavering. "Then stay because the storm has not passed yet," he said, voice softer than she had ever heard. "And I do not want to face it alone." Something shifted inside her, then a quiet, breaking, a letting go. The walls she had built around her heart for years softened just enough to let him in. She exhaled, trembling slightly. "Ethan, this is not how my life works. People like me do not get opportunities like this. People like me just try to survive." He shook his head firmly. "You are not people like you. You are you, and you deserve more than surviving." A long silence followed, warm and fragile. Finally, Lena nodded slowly, barely perceptible, but enough. "I will think about it," she whispered. Relief washed over his features, not triumphant, not possessive, just grateful. "That is all I am asking." She leaned back, breathing more steadily, feeling the warmth of the room settle around her. Ethan stood again, giving her space, but staying close enough that she knew she was not alone. For the first time since stepping into that mansion, Lena felt something unfamiliar but deeply comforting: safety. And for the first time in months, Ethan felt something he thought he had lost completely: hope. The peace of the morning did not last long. By noon, the quiet warmth that had settled over the Malibu mansion after the storm was replaced with the cold, sharp sting of reality banging at the front gate. Ethan did not notice the first signs at first. The distant clicking sounds near the property line, the faint hum of engines lingering too long on the road, the subtle movements behind tinted car windows. He was in the kitchen, helping Lena rinse the teacup she had used earlier, watching the way she concentrated with gentle precision, like she was afraid to break something delicate. It was almost domestic, almost peaceful. Then his phone buzzed 3 times in a row, vibrating urgently across the counter. He frowned, picking it up, and the moment he saw the notification, everything in him tensed. 3 headlines, all published within minutes of each other. Billionaire Ethan Hale spotted with mystery woman at Malibu estate. New maid romance billionaire in scandal again. Who is the woman wearing his shirt? Ethan froze the blood draining from his face. Lena noticed immediately, her hands stilling in the sink. "What is it?" she asked cautiously. He did not answer right away, simply handed her the phone. Her eyes widened the moment she saw the photos, grainy but clear enough. A long-lens paparazzi shot of her leaving the side door that morning wearing his white shirt and holding the blanket around her shoulders. Another angle taken from far away as she leaned slightly against Ethan while he steadied her walking down the driveway. Another photo captured through the rain last night, barely visible, but enough to make it look like something intimate had happened between them. Lena's breath caught. "Ethan, these look bad." "I know." He grabbed the phone back, swiping quickly, scrolling through the articles. Snippets jumped out like sharp claws. After recent heartbreak, is Ethan Hale hiding a new relationship? Sources say the woman may have spent the night. Mystery maid seen during storm emergency. Why was she in his shirt? Shame, embarrassment, frustration, and something dangerously close to anger surged through him. He slammed the phone down on the counter harder than he meant to, making Lena flinch. He immediately softened his tone. "I am sorry, I did not mean to. I should have expected this." The storm, the lights, the drive, the moment outside the store someone was watching. They always are. Lena stepped back instinctively, not from fear of him, but from fear of what this meant for her. "Ethan, they will think I did something inappropriate. They will think I overstepped." Her voice began to shake. "I cannot be in something like this. I cannot be in the middle of your world." Ethan stepped toward her, his voice steady. "No, they are twisting it. You did nothing wrong. I am the one they want headlines from, not you." Before he could say more, the mansion's landline rang a harsh, jarring sound, slicing through the room. He answered quickly, "Ethan here." A clipped voice replied, "Mr. Hale, this is Patricia from the board. We need you at the emergency meeting in 20 minutes. Now." His jaw locked. "I cannot right now." Something came up. Patricia spoke over him. "A public relations threat affects the entire company. You have not officially responded to the article circulating. If the media paints this as another emotional spiral after your broken engagement, investors will panic." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, grounding himself. "I will be there." He hung up, exhaling heavily. Lena stood near the counter, hands trembling slightly. "This is because of me," she whispered. "No." He snapped immediately, not at her but at the situation. "This is because people love to see me fall apart. But they are not dragging you into this. I will not let them." She shook her head, stepping back further. Ethan, I do not belong in your world. I cannot be the maid in another billionaire romance headline. People will think I used you. People will think I came here for money, not a job. Her voice cracked on the last word. I worked so hard to get here. I cannot lose everything because of one storm. Ethan moved forward instinctively, but stopped himself, keeping enough distance to show respect. Lena, look at me. Slowly, she lifted her eyes. Do you think I would ever let anyone paint you as someone who took advantage of me? Do you really believe I would stand back while they twist the truth? She swallowed tears, threatening to spill. You cannot control what people say. You cannot control the internet or the press. He smirked bitterly. No, but I can control my response, and I will. He grabbed his suit jacket, preparing to leave for the board meeting, but paused before heading toward the door. Lena, please do not disappear on me. She looked startled. Ethan, I am not your responsibility. He shook his head firmly. You are not, but you matter. And I will not let the world punish you for something you did not do. She said nothing as he left, but her expression revealed everything: confusion, fear, exhaustion, and something deeper, an ache she did not want to name. 20 minutes later, at the company headquarters, the board sat stiff behind a long glass table, their expressions a mix of concern, irritation, and curiosity. Ethan entered with the kind of calm that only came from years of being dissected by cameras. Patricia began immediately. Ethan, the photographs are compromising. You need to clarify your relationship with the woman. If she is an employee, there are legal risks. We suggest a statement distancing yourself. Ethan's eyes darkened. You want me to pretend she meant nothing? Patricia hesitated. We are asking you to mitigate potential fallout. So yes. He leaned forward, voice like steel. No. She blinked. What do you mean, no? Ethan held her gaze unflinchingly. I mean, I am not going to lie and say she manipulated me, or that she is some opportunist. She helped me during a storm. She kept her boundaries. She was respectful. And I will not let the world destroy her reputation, because they enjoy turning my life into a spectacle. The room went silent. Patricia exhaled sharply. Ethan, you cannot protect someone like her. She does not belong in this world. That sentence hit him like a blow, because it echoed exactly what Lena had said hours earlier. And for the first time, Ethan realized he had a choice. Either let the world decide who Lena was, or decide for himself. He straightened his suit. This meeting is over. The board stared at him stunned. On his way out, he pulled out his phone, typing quickly. Lena, it is me. Stay where you are. I am on my way. When he reached the mansion, she was on the front steps, a small bag beside her, as if she had been deciding whether to leave. Ethan approached her, heart pounding. You are not going anywhere, he said, breathless from urgency. Lena looked up, eyes glossy with fear and uncertainty. Ethan, I cannot let you lose everything because of me. I cannot be the reason your company goes after you. He shook his head, stepping closer, still not touching her, but close enough she could feel the sincerity in his voice. You did not ruin anything. They were wrong about you, and I told them so. Her lips parted, slightly surprised. You did. He nodded once, sunlight, catching the edges of his messy hair. I choose who stays in my life. I choose you. The words hit her like a tremor, breaking something open inside her, something she had been afraid to name. She exhaled shakily, eyes softening with a mixture of fear and longing. Ethan, what if the world keeps coming after us? He smiled gently for the first time that day. Then let them come. I will protect what matters. And right now, Lena, what matters is you. Lena had barely slept after the chaos of the previous day, and by morning the weight of everything felt heavier than the blankets that had kept her warm through the storm. She woke early before sunrise, quietly packing her small canvas bag with the few belongings she had brought to the mansion. The decision tore at her chest, but she knew it was the only way to protect him. She whispered to the empty room, "I cannot ruin his life. I cannot be the story they use against him." And with that, she slipped out of the guest room, leaving the folded shirt he had lent her neatly on the bed. She made it halfway down the driveway before her phone buzzed. Unknown number, but she knew. It was the nursing coordinator from East LA Hospital, her voice trembling slightly. "Miss Morales, your mother was admitted at 4 this morning. She collapsed at home and the situation is serious." For a few seconds, Lena could not breathe. The world tilted and then steadied violently. She thanked the woman, stuffed her phone into her pocket, and sprinted toward the street to catch the earliest bus into the city. By the time Ethan woke, the house felt too still again. He called her name once, twice, walked room to room until panic sharpened his voice. Then he saw the shirt folded on the bed, a symbol, a goodbye. His chest tightened painfully. He grabbed his keys and called her twice. No answer. On the third call, a voice he did not recognize picked up. "Sir, this is East LA Hospital. Are you family of Miss Morales?" Ethan froze. "Not by blood," he said, "but please tell me what happened." The nurse hesitated, then said enough for everything inside him to collapse inward. Her mother, emergency surgery, financial strain, no insurance coverage left. He did not wait for more. He was already out the door, driving faster than he had in years, the Malibu coastline blurring past him in a streak of gold and blue. Meanwhile, Lena sat in a cold plastic chair outside the operating room, shaking from exhaustion and fear. She had signed papers. She barely understood documents about medical consent, legal financial responsibility. Her hands trembled violently when she tried to call someone, anyone who could help, but there was no one. Just as she felt herself unravel completely, heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. Before she even looked up, she felt his presence, like a shift in the air. Ethan appeared at the end of the corridor, out-of-breath hair, wind-blown chest, rising and falling sharply. She stood immediately, tears burning behind her eyes. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" He walked straight to her eyes, searching her face for answers she could not give. "Why did you leave without telling me? Why did you not call me?" She shook her head, wiping tears with the back of her hand. "I could not drag you into this. My problems, my mother, your company, the press. I cannot make your life harder." Ethan stared at her, stunned and furious and heartbroken all at once. "You think you are making my life harder by existing in it. You think walking away from me is protecting me." She pressed a hand to her forehead, trying to steady her breathing. "I had to go, Ethan. My mother was alone. She needed me. And I cannot stay in your world when it keeps trying to crush everything I have left." He exhaled sharply, taking a step closer. "Lena, I already talked to the board. I already defended you. I already chose my stance. Why can you not believe that I am not letting you disappear? Because I do not belong in your world," she whispered, voice cracking. "I am just a maid. People will always look at me like I am nothing. They will think I used you, that I am dragging you down." His jaw clenched. "I do not care what they think, but I care. she whispered softer. I care because I cannot let you sacrifice your life, your reputation, your company for someone like me. Ethan's expression softened slowly, painfully. Lena, look at me. She did, eyes trembling. You are not someone like you. You are not nothing. You are not a headline or a scandal or a mistake. You are the only real thing that has walked into my life in years. The words hit her so hard, she felt her knees weaken. Ethan noticed and reached out, but stopped before touching her, respecting the boundary they had carefully built. She looked down, voice trembling. My mother's surgery costs $25,000. I do not have that kind of money, and I will not let you pay for it. I cannot. Ethan took a slow breath and said quietly, Lena, I already did. She looked up, stunned. You what? The billing office needed a guarantee before they took her in. I gave it. She stepped back, tears slipping down her cheeks. Ethan, you cannot do that. You cannot keep rescuing me. He stepped forward, eyes burning with something raw and unguarded. I did not do it to rescue you. I did it because I care. Because you should not have to face this alone. Because the idea of you carrying pain like this without me makes me sick. Because last night when you disappeared, I realized something terrifying. I do not want a life where you are not in it. Her breath caught her heart pounding so hard, she felt dizzy. Ethan's voice softened, trembling with honesty that stripped him bare. The moment you walked into my house, you made it feel alive again. You made me feel alive again. And I have been dead inside for months, maybe years. He shook his head, exhaling. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, but it was not nothing. It was real. It is real. She tried to speak, but only managed a broken whisper, Ethan. He took one more step, his voice barely above a breath. Lena, please stop trying to run from me. Stop trying to protect me. Let me choose you. Let me care. Her tears slipped unchecked now, each one carving a path down her cheeks. She felt every wall she had built her whole life begin to crumble under the weight of his words, the sincerity in his eyes, and the truth she had been terrified to face. She whispered, I just did not want to be a burden. His voice cracked. You are the only person in my life who has never taken anything from me. You are not a burden. You are the only thing that feels right. Her chest broke open, then a deep, trembling sob escaping before she could stop it. Ethan reached out slowly, carefully giving her every second to pull away, but she did not. She stepped into him, closing the last inch of distance. Tears falling onto his shirt, his hands hovering at her waist, till she nodded barely perceptible permission. Only then did he hold her gently, tenderly, as if she were something precious he was afraid to break. When she whispered, Why would you do all this for me? His answer was immediate, quiet, and raw. Because, Lena, I am in love with you. The words landed between them, soft and devastating. She pulled back just enough to see his face, her eyes wide filled with shock, and something deeper, something blooming. Ethan cupped her jaw with a trembling hand, brushing a tear with his thumb. And I think you feel something too. She did. She felt it in the way her heart reached for him, even when her mind tried to run. In the way his presence felt like safety, like warmth, like a home she never had. She whispered the truth she had been afraid to say. I am falling for you, Ethan. Before she could second-guess it, before fear could take it away, he leaned in slowly, giving her time to stop him, but she did not. And when their lips finally met, it was gentle, fragile healing. Not a firestorm, but a quiet, steady flame that had been waiting to be lit. It was a confession, a promise, and a beginning all at once. 8 months later, the Malibu coastline shimmered beneath a golden late summer sun. The ocean calmed the breeze, warm and steady, carrying the scent of salt and fresh paint from the newly completed community center. Rising proudly beside the cliffs, Ethan stood in front of the glass entrance, fixing the cuffs of his shirt, more nervous than he had been during any billion-dollar negotiation. Behind him, volunteers bustled, organizing supplies for the women and families the foundation would serve, a foundation he had named the Morales Initiative, in honor of Lena's mother, who, after a long and painful recovery, now sat in a wheelchair near the garden, smiling at the sight of her daughter moving confidently among the guests. Lena had changed in ways that made the world feel brighter. She now worked as a humanitarian consultant for the foundation, helping women in crisis find support housing and dignity work she had once thought belonged only to people with degrees and connections. But Ethan had insisted she was the most qualified person he knew because she understood the pain and the struggle firsthand, and because she carried compassion like a natural gift. She wore a soft white dress, simple and elegant, her hair in loose waves, her smile warm every time she greeted someone. Ethan caught himself staring again, unable to look away. His friend Marcus nudged him from behind, smirking. "You are not even subtle about it, man." Ethan shook his head, trying to steady himself. "You would not understand." Marcus laughed. "I understand you look like a guy about to pass out. If I did not know better, I would think you are getting ready to propose or something." Ethan only swallowed, looking toward the small private door leading to the room where everything was prepared. Then Marcus froze. "Wait, are you?" Ethan did not answer. He adjusted his tie, took a breath, and walked away, leaving Marcus gaping behind him. Inside the quiet room, sunlight streamed across the polished wooden floor, casting long warm beams across a neatly made bed. On top of it lay a carefully folded white shirt, the same shirt Lena had worn that morning. After the storm, a symbol of chaos, tenderness, and the beginning of something that had changed both their lives. Beside it on the nightstand, a small velvet ring box waited. Ethan picked up the shirt, running his fingers over the fabric, remembering the shock in his chest when he first saw her wearing it. The disbelief, the pull, the way something inside him had shifted before he even understood it. He placed the shirt gently back on the bed, exhaled deeply, and whispered to himself, "Do not screw this up, Hale." Then he stepped out into the hallway. Outside, Lena was laughing with one of the volunteers, and the warmth in her expression softened something in him in a way that still surprised him months later. When she finally noticed Ethan, she gave him that small, gentle smile that always made the world quieter around him. "Are you ready for the dedication?" she asked. "Almost," he replied. "But I need you for something first." He offered his hand, and she took it without hesitation, trusting him in a way that still humbled him. He led her into the private room, closing the door softly behind them. Lena looked around, confused, her gaze catching on the white shirt lying perfectly folded on the bed. Her breath caught. "Ethan, what is this?" He stepped closer, voice warm but trembling. "Do you remember the morning you wore that shirt?" Lena laughed softly, shaking her head. "How could I forget? I was terrified, mortified, and you were staring at me like you had seen a ghost." He smiled at the memory. "I was staring because everything in my life shifted in that moment. I did not know it then. I tried to pretend it was nothing, but it was everything. She looked at him, eyes softening. Ethan. He took her hands in his voice steadier now, but threaded with emotion. Since that day, you have changed every corner of my life. You brought humanity back into me. You brought warmth back into this house. You made me want things I thought I had lost forever. He swallowed, then continued. I built this initiative because of you. Because you showed me how much one act of compassion can change a life. Because you showed me what it means to care without expecting anything in return. Tears filled her eyes. Ethan, you do not owe me anything. I know, but I want to give you everything anyway. He let go of her hands, only long enough to reach for the small velvet box. When he slowly bent down on one knee, Lena gasped a hand, flying to her mouth, her heart pounding so hard she felt dizzy. Ethan opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring framed in soft gold. Lena Morales, he said, voice cracking slightly. The first morning you wore my shirt, I froze. I had no idea how someone like you could walk into a place as cold as my life and make it feel like home. Tonight, I want to remember that morning for a different reason. He looked up at her, eyes full of love and sincerity. Will you marry me? Lena shook her head in disbelief, tears spilling over. Ethan, I am just a maid. He rose slowly, closing the distance between them, his hands cupping her face gently. You were a maid, he said softly. But to me, you are the reason I found my way back to myself. You are the reason I know what love feels like. You are everything I want, everything I choose. Her voice trembled. Ethan, I do not know if I can be what you expect. He smiled gently, brushing a tear from her cheek. The only thing I expect is a life we build together, messy, honest, real. She exhaled shakily, her heart aching with a joy so intense it scared her, and then she nodded, yes. Ethan's breath left him in a single stunned, relieved laugh as he slid the ring onto her finger, pulling her into a soft, trembling kiss, filled with promise and gratitude. Later, as they stepped outside, hand in hand, the sunset painted the Malibu sky in shades of rose and gold. People applauded when they saw the ring, and Ethan lifted her hand proudly for everyone to see, while Lena blushed and laughed, embarrassed but glowing. He leaned in, whispering against her hair. Sometimes love begins with a storm, she finished softly, and a borrowed shirt. They stood together, watching the sun sink beneath the horizon, and for the first time in their lives, both felt entirely at home. Not in the mansion, not in the city, but in each other. If you are still here listening to this story, then you already know this is not just a billionaire romance, and it is not just a love story between a man with wealth and a woman who walked into his life on the night everything fell apart. It is a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected people change us in the most unforgettable ways. Maybe you saw a little of yourself in Ethan, trying to hold everything together while carrying the weight of loneliness in silence. Or maybe you saw yourself in Lena, someone who has fought for every inch of her life, someone who has learned to survive storms without expecting anyone to care. If this story touched you in any way, if it made you feel something in your chest, if it made you think about the people you love, or the people who once saved you, or maybe the people you wish would look at you the way Ethan looked at her, then do not leave without doing one small thing. Show your support. Stories like this take hours of writing, filming, editing, and love to bring to life, and your simple action helps this channel grow and reach more people who need stories that heal, comfort, and remind them that love still exists, even in a world that feels cold. So if you felt connected to this journey, if you want more stories where kindness becomes strength, where love grows slowly, patiently, beautifully, where characters fight their way back to themselves and to each other, then tap the like button right now. It may seem like a tiny gesture, but it tells the algorithm that you want to see more stories that make your heart race and your soul soften. And if you want to be part of this community, if you want to hear more about strong women, gentle men, slow burn tension and love that feels earned, not forced, then make sure you subscribe and turn on the little notification bell so you never miss the next chapter. Because every week we release new stories built with emotion depth and that special spark that reminds you love is still worth believing in. And here is the truth. Someone out there might need this story today. Someone who thinks they are alone. Someone who thinks they are not seen. Someone who believes love is for everyone except them. Sharing this video might be the thing that helps them breathe a little easier. So if you know someone who could use a reminder that storms pass and good people exist, share this with them. Send it to a friend, a sibling, someone you care about, or just post it where someone who needs it might find it. And before this video ends, I want to ask you a simple question. What part of the story stayed with you? Was it the moment Ethan realized he had almost lost her? Was it the morning she wore his shirt? Was it the first time he admitted she made him feel alive again? Or was it the moment she finally said yes? Comment below and tell me. Your words matter here, and I read every single one. And if you want to support the channel even further, if you want to help us keep making these long, cinematic, emotional stories, you can become a channel member with exclusive perks, early access, behind the scenes, and bonus stories that dive even deeper into the worlds you love. The link is below. But even if you never join, never subscribe, never like, just know this: you being here means something. Thank you for listening, for feeling, for caring. Till the next story, remember this. Love begins in the quiet moments, in the storms we survive, and sometimes in a borrowed shirt that changes everything.